Namaskar. Welcome back to another class of BOSSE, Board of Open Schooling and Skill Education, Sikkim. Today is going to be the second session on the subject social science, and the subject is going to be India and the World, Module 1, through the ages. India and the World through the ages, Lesson 1, Ancient World. Now, चश्मा कर दिया मैंने स्नेहा मैंने चश्मा कहाँ रख दिया After completing this lesson, you will be able to describe the contributions of ancient Bronze Age civilizations, Mesopotamia, the Chinese, the Egyptian, and the Indus Valley. Second, you will also be able to recognize the contribution of the Iron Age civilizations, Greek, Roman, and Persian. Explain the important developments in Indian history from the Vedic age down to the time of Harsha, and examine the different aspects of India's contribution to world civilization. So you have a long trip to make in ancient India, and it's going to be a very interesting session for you all. And we are going to now start discussing about the ancient world. You have read about prehistory in the earlier lesson, in the introductory lesson. You have also learned that during the Stone Age, humans learned to make tools and weapons of stone, of bone, and of wood. You also learned that they lived in caves and found food by hunting and food gathering. Later, they learned about agriculture, domestication of animals, and they now started leading a settled life, which you can understand as community staying together. Now, the Stone Age was followed by the Metal Age, Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. It was with the discovery of metal that human civilizations became highly evolved. During the Bronze Age, advanced civilizations came up in Mesopotamia, China, Egypt, and India. We will read about all these civilizations in some detail in this lesson. We will also read about the Iron Age civilizations in Greece, Rome, and Persia, as well as in India. So you can see it is continuation from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age and now to the Iron Age, and then so on and so forth. Isn't it surprising that the use of iron started so long back? We still use iron in some way or the other, don't we? Look around you and you will find many things made of iron and steel. We also have steel utensils in our homes, and steel is a refined form of iron. Further, we are going to be reading in detail about ancient India, about the emperors, and about the dynasties that ruled India during this period. You will realize that India's contribution to human civilization is tremendous. Isn't it interesting and exciting to know about our glorious past? Let us start this journey into our past and know how we human beings have traveled through the ages and evolved into sophisticated, advanced, and highly civilized people. And as I read out to you, that the learning objectives are going to be describing the contributions of ancient Bronze Age civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization. Now, before I start with these civilizations, that is Mesopotamia, Chinese, Egyptian, and the Indus Valley, I'm going to tell you something about the Bronze Age for all the four of them. Towards the end of the New Stone Age began the use of metal. Now, copper was the first metal which was used by these civilizations. The cultures based on the use of both stone and copper are called Chalcolithic cultures. This is also called the Bronze Age because of the invention of bronze in this period, which is an alloy of copper and tin. Gradually, very gradually, copper and bronze replaced stone, wood, and bones to some extent for making weapons and implements. People learned how to make bricks and use them in construction. These bricks were baked and sun-dried. Town-based civilizations came up for the first time in different river valleys. These towns became centers of trade, of commerce, and administration. The Bronze Age people had built up great civilizations and made significant contributions. In this section, we are going to be reading about all these four civilizations that came up during the Bronze Age. Now we start with the Mesopotamian civilization. Now Mesopotamia is a land lying between two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, which lie in modern-day Iraq. These rivers were often in flood, and in this process, they deposited a lot of silt, which was made the land around them very fertile. This resulted in increased food production. The abundant agricultural produce enabled the growth of a number of crafts, persons, and people like smiths, potters, masons, weavers, and carpenters came up during this time, and they sold their products and got the necessities from others in exchange. They carried on trade with far off places like India. Carts, wagons, boats, and ships were used for transport communication. They also developed the art of writing. Their script was a collection of symbols and pictures. They drew wedge-like lines, and so the script came to be known as the cuneiform script. The earlier cities of Mesopotamia were like small states, each with its own administration. The ruling class consisted of priests, of kings, of aristocrats. Besides them, there were merchants, ordinary people, and the slaves. The people of Mesopotamia worshipped many gods and goddesses like sun, moon, fertility, etc. Each city had its own patron or god or goddess. Now you'll be surprised to know that most of the civilizations have these things in common of the Bronze Age. And even today we find the same thing prevalent. Now we come to the, you'll read more about it in greater detail in your book. I'm just identifying the important things. Now we come to the next civilization, which is called the Egyptian civilization. This arose around the river Nile, which had a very fertile land. Now this silt was brought in from the river Nile, and sometimes there were floods also. The Egyptian kings were called pharaohs, and they had ministers and officers for their services and administered the land and collected taxes from them. They enjoyed a very high and honorable place in society. Temples were dedicated to a particular god in each town or city, just like in Mesopotamian civilization. The ancient Egyptian script was called hieroglyphic. Traders and merchants carried on their business both with water and on land. They were skilled workers like stone cutters and carpenters. Egyptians had considerable knowledge of weights and measures. Now these pharaohs made great monuments of the ancient world. The pyramids. The Egyptians believed in afterlife. So what did they do? They preserved their dead. These were called mummies. The pyramids were built as tombs to keep the mummified bodies inside it, and these were mostly above the dead kings. Now we come across now to the next civilization, which is another important civilization called the Chinese civilization. Now the Chinese civilization grew up in the Honghu Valley in northern China. The first rulers were called Shangs, who built China's first cities. They also contributed to art and culture. China is famous for art and culture, just like India. The Chinese writing system was developed during this period. Craftspersons of this period, especially the bronze workers, were great experts in their own fields. The Shang dynasty was overthrown by the Zhous, who built strong forts and walled towns to defend themselves from invaders. It was during the later phase of the Zhou rule that iron was introduced in China, which we will read later on. Now, in 221 BC, the Qin rulers came to power in China. See, First the Shang dynasty, then the Zhus came in, and now the Qin rulers. They ordered the use of common language, common laws, and common weights and measures throughout their empire. Do you know that they were the rulers who built the famous Great Wall of China? You know, it is the longest wall, and it is to be kept for the invaders. That means the invaders could not break this wall down, and China was safe. This was the longest wall in the world. And do you know which is the second largest wall, rather the longest wall also in the world? Well, it is called what? No, you will have to find out, or maybe I'll tell you later on. Okay, no, I'll tell you right now. It is called it is in the Kumbhalgarh Fort in Rajasthan. And further down, if you go further down Udaipur, you will come across this wall, this fort actually. It has the longest. In fact, if you will be surprised to know that 6 horsemen could run on the parapet of these wall of this particular wall. Similarly, like in China, after the Qins, the Han Dynasty came to power. Then it was during this period that Chinese had contact with the West through the famous Silk Route, crossing Central Asia and Persia. If you look into the YouTube and you type out the Silk Route, you will get many videos, and it will be interesting to know more about it from those videos, because they even have got pictures and lovely films made on it. The people of China worshipped a number of deities. Worship of ancestors, nature, and spirits were common. In China, a famous religious preacher named Confucius advocated a system of right behavior, right, which greatly influenced Chinese society and government. He laid emphasis on good moral character, respect to elders, and loyalty to the family, and obedience to the laws of the state. Then we come to the very most important civilization in this world, and that is known as the Indus Valley civilization. Now, why is it important? It is important primarily because Indus Valley is something to do with our country, our people, and we must really know a lot about this particular civilization. Now, the Bronze Age civilizations. Now, the Indus Valley civilization. Do you know that India was also a part of the Bronze Age civilization? Of course. I've told you, and you must remember it. Which flourished in the valley of River Indus and neighboring regions. The ancient civilization was discovered when archaeologists began excavating the sites connected with it in the 1920s. Before that, we did not know about this civilization. The first site to be excavated were Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Thus, this is why it is called the Harappan civilization. At present, hundreds of sites of this culture are known. The most important cities were Harappa in western Punjab, Mohenjo-daro in Sindh, Lothal in Gujarat. Now, Lothal and Kalibangam, Ropar, Banawali, and Rakhigarhi and Dholavira in Gujarat are all in our country. Now, town planning was a very important aspect of these civilizations, and Indus Valley was a marvel. One of the most interesting features of the civilization was the emergence of the first urban societies in South Asia. The most remarkable aspect was the high level of sophistication in town planning, crafts, and culture. The people lived in well-planned cities. A general feature of the cities was the presence of a fortified citadel which housed public buildings. Now, cities had wide roads, really wide, which cut each other at right angles. The houses were made of brick, and most of them were also two-story. There were wells in each house, if not in each, at least in the village. There were baths, drains, and sewage in each house. Paved roads and street lightnings were also known. Apart from this, the living houses in the lower town, big multi-pillared halls have also been discovered at the citadel area in Mohenjo-daro. Here, the most striking feature was the Great Bath, which was 180 feet long. 180 feet long and 108 feet long and 108 feet wide. The bathing pool in it was 39 feet long, 23 feet wide, and 8 feet deep. The great granary of Harappa was another important feature. The surplus produced by these peasants was stored here. So you had the great bath, in the town planning, the great bath, the citadel area, and also the granary, which was a very important aspect of this particular civilization. Now, in society and economy, the people practiced agriculture, animal husbandry, arts and crafts, trade, and commerce. Main crops were wheat, barley, rye, sesame, and pea. Evidence of rice has been found at Lothal and at Rangpur. Furrow marks found at Kalibangam shows the plowing was known to them. Sickles were used for harvesting. Various forms of irrigation were practiced. Cotton was a popular product. Animals like cows, goats, that is, grass eating animals, were to be found over here, and they were domesticated. Humped bulls, dogs, cats, camels, and donkeys were all there. The people consumed cereals like fish, meat, milk, eggs, and fruit. Tools and weapons made from copper and bronze were mostly used. Ornaments were made of gold, silver, precious and semi-precious stones, conch, and ivory. Iron was not known to them. See, iron civilization came in much later. Among artisans and craftsmen, there were potters, masons, carpenters, ironsmiths, rather smiths. Not maybe iron came in much later, so they must be making instruments out of bronze. Jewelers, sculptures, stone cutters, brick makers, and terracotta and manufacture of many other things. Trade and commerce was also carried out. Both interregional trade and external trade were carried out also. Several excavated points to Harappan trade, several evidences to point to the Harappan trade with Mesopotamia. Main imports consisted of metals like gold, tin, copper, and various kinds of precious and semi-precious stones. Among the exports were agricultural products, cotton goods, potteries, jewelries, ivory products, and other crafts. Harappa seals were probably used for commercial purposes. That means these seals were used for exchange of goods. Earlier, the barter system was there, but now seals were also used for trade. The society was divided into classes. Now, what about the religion and culture? The cult of Mother Goddess seems to have been very popular. Many theories of mother goddesses have also been found. One male deity has also been found at Mohenjo-daro, which has been called the prototype of Lord Shiva, Pashupatinath. At Mohenjo-daro, and this deity was represented in a seal, sitting in a yogic posture and surrounded by animals. Lingam worship and nature worship of trees was also very prevalent. Can you see the similarities in the religious practices among the Hindus of the Indus Valley civilization and our practices today? Now, when you visit Shiva temple, you can see that Shiva Lingam is also worshipped. You must be aware that Hindus also worship trees like people. People is held sacred. Now, let us see more about their technical skills. They had also acquired high levels of technical skill. They had knowledge of urban engineering, weights and measures, health and hygiene. They also knew how to write. They used a script which has not been yet deciphered. It is difficult to say what actually caused the ultimate decline of this particular civilization. Natural calamities seem to be the most important cause of the decline of this civilization. Recurring floods, drying up of rivers, decreasing soil fertility, and deforestation led to the constant consumption of wood, earthquakes, scanty rainfall, extension of desert seem to have played havoc with this particular civilization. According to some scholars, the decline of overseas trade with Mesopotamia may have also contributed to decline of this civilization. With this decline, literacy and urban life disappeared in India for more than 1,000 years. Now, as I told you earlier, that after when a particular unit ends, you have topics. We have in-text questions, and these questions are very small so that you can answer them easily. So it's actually a way of recalling what you have learned in this particular unit. Now, after going through this, we come to the next civilizations that, and it's called the Iron Age civilizations. Now, Iron Age began about 3,000 years ago when it came to be produced on a large scale and its use became common. It was much cheaper and stronger than copper and bronze. So the use of iron tools and implements enabled our forefathers to clear forests and to reclaim lands for the extension of cultivation. When you need land for cultivation, obviously, when you do agriculture, you need land, and the land must be clear. That means there should not be any obstacles. So that thing could be now whatever things were to be cleared, like forests, jungles, big heavy trees. Now they could be cut down with the help of iron. Now agricultural production thus increased considerably. This brought radical changes in the social and economic life of the people. Now, the use of iron had a great impact on transport and communication. Iron rims and spokes were used in wheels to make them stronger. You remember, we read about the discovery of the wheel during the, and when we are reading about the Neolithic age. Well, iron nails and sheets were widely used for making boats and ships. Now, these wheels are more advanced because with the iron, more refiner version of a wheel was there. Now, trade and commerce flourished. This trade brought prosperity. New weapons of war, like the use of long, heavy sword, saber, iron shield, spear, and lance, changed the methods of warfare. So obviously, you can understand now the warfare is going to be more dangerous. It can kill. The Iron Age was also a period of intellectual progress. The most important development was the beginning of alphabets, writing. This replaced the old pictographic style, a style of writing about which you have already read in the Bronze Age civilization. You know, the civilizations which flourished during this time were the Greeks, the Roman, the Persian, and the Indian continuity. They were much more advanced than the early civilizations, and now we are going to read about them in greater detail. Now, the Greek civilization. Now, the Greek civilization flourished in Greece more than 2,000 years ago. There arose many independent city-states which developed a remarkable system of government. See, first people were living as nomads. Then they started learning how to use stones. Then they started learning how to use more refined stones, more sharp stones. Then they started using the small copper and bronze made tools. Now they have just started using what we call the tools were there, and now they had started also living together. Community life had started. So there were small villages, communities were there, but now we have called the city-state, and city-state would need a proper administration. Each city was enclosed by a wall for protection. Now they were on a bigger scale, on a larger scale, because many communities, many villages now joined together to form a town. Inside the city, there was a fort called Acropolis, which was situated on a hilltop. You see many of the, even if you see in India, most of the forts are built on a higher pedestal so that they could see the enemy from far. They could see who was coming. So similarly, even remember, you see, they were made on a citadel, a higher place. Among the Greek city-states, the most famous were Athens and Sparta. And Athens was rich and cultured Athenian citizens, including writers, philosophers, artists, and thinkers. The society was based on slave trade, but the citizens enjoyed a democratic form of government. Now, which were the important cities over here? Sparta, and was important over here. Trading in welfare was considered to be the most important thing over here. And there was continuous rivalry between Athens and Sparta, but they fought side by side to drive off the mighty Persian army of Darius I and Xerxes, who tried to conquer Greece. Do you know that ancient Greek had the distinction of being called the birthplace of Western civilization? They were pioneers in art and learning, science, literature, and sculpture. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were great philosophers whose works are studied even today. Herodotus and Thucydides were famous historians, and Archimedes, Aristarchus, and Democritus were great scientists. Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Aristophanes were great dramatists. Homer was the author of the famous epic Iliad and Odyssey. Do you know which is our famous epic? Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The longest poem is the Mahabharata. They also had great knowledge of architecture, and each city had its own protector or goddess. The gods were believed to live in Mount Olympus, high up in the sky. The Olympic Games, first recorded in 776 BC, were held every 4 years at a place called Olympia. Sports and athletic events were held to honor Zeus, the king of gods. Now we come to another civilization, was the Roman civilization. Okay. In 510 BC, the Romans set up a republic on the city of Rome, which is on river Tiber, 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 in central Italy. The Roman Republic was ruled by the Senate, which consisted of a group of elders called senators. By 200 BC, Rome had become the leading power of Italy. It was able to defeat rivals like Carthage for the control of the Mediterranean world. Now, in the early Roman society were three classes of people: the patricians, which are the aristocrats, the plebeians, which were the commoners, and the slaves. Roman economy was based on slave labor. Rich Romans owned slaves. These slaves are often trained for the gladiators fight, which was a fight between the slaves and the wild animals. Imagine how cruel. There were also frequent slave revolts in Rome. One such revolt was led by Spartacus in 74 BC. The Roman Empire spread to 3 continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. Do you know that it was during the rule of Augustus, the great prophet, Jesus Christ appeared? It was the rule of he was the founder of the Christian dynasty, the Christianity. He was born in Bethlehem. According to him, all men and women are the children of God. He taught people to love each other. After his death, the followers of Christ spread his teachings far and wide among the people. In India also we have many Christians. Now, the Roman Empire was divided into several provinces, each ruled by a governor, and he had a number of officers under him who looked after different affairs of the state. By 395 AD, the huge Roman Empire was divided into 2 halves for better governments. Emperor Constance gave Byzantine a new name, Constantinople. It became the home of Eastern Orthodox Christian faith and the capital city of the Byzantine emperors. Now we come to the Persian civilization. And I cannot do all of it within this hour. It's not that easy. But I'm pointing out important things to you. And please, you go over and read the entire lesson properly. In the Iron Age, Persia was inhabited by the Aryan communities. This is modern Iran. One branch of them, known as the Medes, settled in the western part of the country. Another branch occupied the southern and eastern parts and was called the Persians. Now, the Persian emperors were also able administrators. They divided their empire into provinces, each governed by a satrap or a governor. The Persians were good soldiers with strong cavalry, navy, and had iron weapons. Like the Indo-Aryans, the early Persians worshipped the forces of nature. They believed in the sun god, sky god, and other gods. See, all of them have something common or the other, even with our Indian civilization. They considered fire to be a symbol of holiness, and they also performed fire rites and practical animal sacrifices. Okay, so do you find that there is a lot of common gods and goddesses that same as we have in India, all worshipping? The religious preacher Zoroaster found the religious called Zoroastrianism. So we had read about Christianity and Zoroastrianism during the Iron Age. He taught them about Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Heaven and Light, who gives men strength and energy. Now, according to Zoroaster, life was a constant struggle between good and evil. The holy scriptures of the Persians is called Zende Avesta. And you will be surprised that there are many people following this religion living in our country also. Now we come to our country, and that is India, the Vedic age. Now the early Vedic people generally led a nomadic life and did not stay for long at any one place. Their economy was mainly pastoral, and they kept on to moving from one place to another. Cattle rearing was the chief means of livelihood. Horses, goats, and sheep were also important. A little agriculture was also practiced. Family, class, and tribes called janas were the social units, and there were no castes. The chief of the tribe was called Raja. Popular assemblies of all members of the janas, called sabhas and samitis, had an important say in public affairs. A number of deities were worshipped, Indra being the most important of them. The later Vedic period is known as much greater detail from the vast corpus of later Vedic literature, as well as from archaeological material. The later Vedic literature comprised of the following books, that is the three Vedas, the Samaved, Yajurved, and Atharvaved. You remember Rig Ved was in the last, when we were reading about the Indus Valley civilization. There were also commentaries on all the four Vedas called Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and the Upanishads. Now, during the later Vedic period, there was a large-scale eastward movement of the Aryan communities to the Indo-Gangetic Doab and Upper Ganga plains. Towards the end of this period, three important kingdoms came up. Came up further east: Kashi, Koshala, and Videha. Agriculture was now the main occupation, and number of crops, including rice, wheat, and sugar cane, were grown. Crafts also multiplied. Iron weapons and tools were introduced. People now led a settled life in villages. Castes began to emerge. During this time, castes began to emerge and crystallize in the form of the four varnas: the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudra. The powers of the king and his men increased, and those of the assembly were proportionately undermined. Sacrifices now became very elaborate. The importance of the god receded, and new gods such as Prajapati figured prominently. Towards the end of this period, a reaction to the sacrificial ritual could also be observed, which we find mentioned in the Upanishads. Now, the post-Vedic age. In the 6th century BC, there came up large territorial states in northern and eastern India known as the Mahajanpads. There were 16 such states, namely the Anga, Magad, Vajji, Kashi, Koshala, Malla, Kuru, Panchal, Bassa, Avanti, Kamboj. It's interesting to read about these cities, and you will find them mentioned in the Mahabharata, also in the battle which took place. Gandhar, remember Gandhar, Gandhari, and Asaka, Chedi, Matsya, and Shurasen. Among them, Magad, Koshal, and Avanti were the most powerful. The 6th century BC was also a period of social, religious, and Vedic sacrifices. There emerged numerous sects and reformatory movements. The period called the ancient period in history saw the rise of two important religions in our country. They are a part of our Hindu pantheon, and they're known as Jainism and Buddhism. Now, Buddhism was Gautam Buddha was the founder of Buddhism, and he was born in 563 BC at Lumbini, which is situated near the Indo-Nepal border. His teachings included four noble truths: Arya, that is Satya, and the Eightfold Path, the Ashtangika Marga. And according to Buddha, the world is full of misery. Desire is the cause, or the desire is cause of all this misery. And now, if desire is conquered, then all sorrows can be removed. And you can read about it in greater detail in this lesson. Now, when we come on to Jainism, now Rishabhna, the first Tirthankar, is known to be the founder of Jainism. Now, Vardhaman Mahavira was the 24th Tirthankar of this particular time. Parshvanath being the 23rd one, Mahavira was born in 540 BC at Kundagram near Vaishali. His followers came to be known as the Jainas. Jainism had no place for a supreme creator. He recognized the existence of God but placed them lower than the Jaina teachers. The main aim of Jainism is the attainment of freedom from worldly bonds. Like Buddhism, Jainism also opposed the ritualistic practices and evils of Brahmanism. It also opposed the caste system and accepted the doctrine of karma and rebirth. And Jainism also had 5 principles: ahimsa or non-violence, abstinence from being stealing, celibacy, truthfulness, non-detachment. And the 3 jewels, or the Ratna of Jainism, was right vision, right knowledge, right conduct. Similarity with the Buddhist religion also. Then we come on to the Mauryan period in history. Of the 16 Mahajanpas, it was Magad that expanded considerably under powerful rulers like Bimbisar, Ajatashatru, and Mahapadma Nanda. Bindusar, the son and successor of Chandragupta. Now, what has happened is, by a continuous process of conquest and annexation, we are able to unify almost the whole of India. Who? Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta ruled from 322 BC to 297 BC, and he embraced Jainism under the influence of Bhadra Bahu. He died at Sravangola near Mysore. Bindusar was the son and successor of Chandragupta Maurya, and he was also known as Mitra Ghata, slayer of enemies. He is said to have conquered Deccan, extending Mauryan control as far as Mysore. He also had contacts with Antiochus, that is the group ruler of Western Asia. It appears from the Buddhist literature that after the death of Bindusar, there was a struggle for the throne among his sons. Now then came Ashoka. He emerged victorious in the fratricidal war of succession and ascended the throne of Magad. An important event of his reign was the famous Kalinga War, after which Ashoka gave up all forms of war and became a Buddhist. He had certain edicts, certain rock edicts. Like, for example, it is mentioned in the rock edict 13 that the reign was a famous, that mentioned in his rock edict about the Kalinga War. Ashoka embraced Buddhism and gave up a war after this war of Kalinga. Now, rock edicts and pillar edicts inscribed by him give a detailed account of his reign. That is, you will find the rock edicts and pillar edicts. He wrote his his policy of Dham on these edicts, and his policy was based on religious toleration, respect to elders, and care for the old, kindness, truthfulness, and purity. He gave the rock edicts ascribed by him, gave a detailed account of his reign. Now we come to the Sangam age. It'll be a very long chapter. I have to run right through, but I'm pointing out the important things to you. But please do read them. With the Sangam age, the historical period began in southern India. Very important. The word Sangam means an assembly of scholars of literary figures held under the royal patronage of Pandyan kings of Madurai Early Tamil literature comprised works such as Tolkappiyam, the Eighth Anthologies, and so on. The Sangam age extends roughly between 300 BC to 200 AD, from 300 BC to 200 AD. So you can imagine all about the Sangam literature would be this particular age would be telling us all about the kings that ruled during this particular time in southern part of the country. The Sangam literature also refers primarily to the Pandyan kingdom, but it also contains valuable information of the Cholas and the Chera kingdom. The Pandyan rulers ruled over an area comprising southern Tamil Nadu, Madurai being their capital. The Cheras ruled over Kerala, and the Cholas occupied northern Tamil Nadu and southern Andhra Pradesh. Then we come to the Kushan age. The greatest rulers of the Kushan dynasty was Kanishka, who became king after Vima. Kushana conquered Kashmir and established his supremacy over the Indo-Gangetic plain. He occupied Kashgar, Yarkand, and Khotan in Central Asia. Punjab and Afghanistan were also parts of this empire. Kanishka was devoted to Buddhists. Through his efforts, Buddhism spread to China, Central Asia, and the other countries. He was also a great patron of art and learning. Purushapur, Peshawar was his capital. Kanishka's successor was Vashishka, Hovishka, and Kanishka II, and Vasudeva. And the Kushan Empire, after his death, the mighty Kushan Empire quickly disintegrated. The fall of Kushan Empire marked the beginning of political uncertainty in northern part of the country, which continued for about a century. Then we come to another very important age. Two very important ages we have learned over here, the Mauryans and the Guptas. But in between the Sangam and the Kushan age is also a very important aspect of our history. So we come to the Gupta age. The rise of the Gupta power in the 4th century marked the beginning of a new era in Indian history. Confusion and political disunity were replaced by integrity. Under the leadership and patronage of the powerful Gupta monarchs, considerable progress was made in different parts of Indian life. There was also a high material prosperity, as mentioned by Faiyan, the Chinese traveler who came to India in the 5th century AD. Now, Maharaja Srigupta is said to be the founder of the Gupta dynasty. He was succeeded by Ghatotkacha, but Chandragupta I, who assumed the title of Maharaja Dhiraj, was the first important Gupta monarch during this time. Another important Gupta emperor was Samudragupta. The eulogy composed by his court poet Hari Sen, which is available as Allahabad Pillar inscriptions, gives a vivid account of Samudragupta's military campaign. Besides being a great conqueror and ruler, he was also a poet of high order, patron of art and learning, and a musician. He also performed the Ashwamedh Yagna. Now, Maharaja Sri Gupta is said to be the founder of the Gupta dynasty. Wait a minute. Post Gupta. Wait. Then we come to the. Now, Samudragupta was succeeded by Chandragupta, who assumed the title of Vikramaditya after his victory over the Shaka rulers of Western India. In order to consolidate his power, Samudragupta made important matrimonial alliances. His daughter Prabhavati was married to the Vakataka ruler Rudrasen II. The son and successor of Chandragupta II was Kumaragupta, whose reign was marked with peace and prosperity. He was succeeded by his son Skandagupta. Now, monarchy was the prevailing system of, who repulsed the Hun invasion several times. The successors, Skandagupta, Buddhagupta, Narasimhagupta, were not so powerful. This gradually led to the decline and fall of the Gupta Empire. And now, monarchy was the prevailing system of government during the Golden Age. The Gupta Age. The king was assisted by a council of ministers and other officials in day-to-day administration. The Guptas had a powerful army. The provinces were ruled by governors. Governors had under them a number of officers who administered the districts and towns. Village administration under the village headman Gramika enjoyed considerable autonomy. The Guptas also developed an efficient system of judicial and revenue administration. Now, the post-Gupta age, the period between the downfall of the Gupta Empire and the rise of the Magadh, Harshvardhan and Thaneshwar is considered to be, and Maharaja Harshvardhan of the Thaneshwar is considered to be a part of, is said to be a of time when there was a lot of confusion and disintegration. During this time, India was broken into several small independent states. Besides the Hunapar, there were four other kingdoms in northern India. These were the later Guptas of Magadh, the Mokharis of Kannauj, the Pushyabhutis of Thaneswar, and the Mitrikas of Vallabhi. Among the important South Indian dynasties were the Chalukyas of Badami and the Pallavas of Kanchi. Pulakesin II and Narasimha Varman were considered to be the greatest of the Chalukyan and the Pallava rulers, respectively. It was Harshvardhan who again made an attempt to raise an empire. He was called Sakalatur Prathanath because he had established his hold practically over the whole of northern India. During this time, the political unity of India was to some extent restored. Harsh patronized Banabhat, the author of Kadambari, who wrote about Harsh's rule, and Harish Charita. Yun Sang, the Chinese scholar traveler, visited India during this period. Shashank, the king of Bengal, was a contemporary of Harsha. The period of history has witnessed the consolidation of Hinduism. Yun Sang's written about the existence of caste system in Indian society. There was the rise of several mixed and subcastes. Yun Sang also mentions the existence of untouchability and outcaste. The position of women had also declined considerably during this period. In the religious fields, the ascendancy of Brahmanism brought about the decline of the Buddhism. Vaishnavism, Shaivism, and Jainism were also practiced. Now, Indian civilization and overview. The Indian civilization had a very important place in world history. As in early Greece and Rome, India also had some kind of democratic and republican form of government which existed during those times. We also made tremendous progress in philosophy and various branches of science. Indian contribution to the field of mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, metallurgy, and medicine is worth mentioning. Aryabhat and Varamahir were famous mathematicians. Astronomers. Charak and Sushruta were great physicians. Nagarjuna was a famous chemist as well as pharmacist. The concept of zero and the decimal system first evolved in India. Can you imagine? You have Charak and Sushruta, great physicians. Nagarjuna being the famous chemist. Can you imagine all this during those days? The ancient Indians also showed great skill in art, architecture, painting, and sculpture. Ashokan pillars, caves of Ajanta and Ellora, beautiful caves of Ajanta and Ellora in, if you go towards Maharashtra, in Aurangabad district, you will find lovely caves out there. Please go and have a look at them. Don't just read about them. If you have an opportunity, do read. Do go there. South Indian temples, the famous stupa at Sanchi, Buddha's images of Mathura are only a few examples from the vast ocean of Indian art. Many great centers of learning were also developed in ancient India. The Taxila, Nalanda, Vikramshila, Vallabhi, Kashi, and Kanchi were important education centers, both Indian and foreign, which had both Indian and foreign students. Indian learning and scholarship was highly appreciated abroad by the Arab Muslims. Many great works of literature were produced in ancient India. Just excuse me. The Rig Veda is the earliest specimen of Indo-European literature. The four Vedas, Sutras, the two epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. I'm sure you must have read about the Ramayana and Ramayana and Mahabharata at some time or the other, if not for religious reasons, at least for knowing they are beautiful works of literature and very famous, world famous all over. You must read at least, or you read stories about them. And there are many books. Like once upon a time, there was this Amar Chitra Katha who used to bring out the publications were there, and people would read. Children, school children would read stories from them. I was also one of them, and I found them very interesting. Not only is it gives you an insight of what our culture was all about, it also gives you, there are also small photographs, pictures made, there are pictures in it which help you also understand. Then we had Smritis, we had the Puranas, the Tripitakas, the Jaina, Agamas, and other religious texts are the product of ancient India. Moreover, there are a number of drama, prose, and poetic works. Great literacy figures like Kalidasa, Banabhat, Harisena, Vishakadatta, Bhasa, Bhairavi, Shudrak, and many others belong to this period. Sanskrit, Pali, and Prakrit literature made great progress in ancient India, though we were given an opportunity to learn Sanskrit when we were very small. That means when we were going to school. But we could not take much of an interest in the language, primarily because we had a lot to learn and we had to study a lot. But today, I really wish I had read at least Sanskrit. It would have helped me a lot. I might have been a wiser human being also. Now, when you finish this lesson, that brings us to an end to this lesson. Then now we see what you have learned. Now, human civilization has evolved through various phases, such as each phase contributing something unique. The Stone Ages were followed by the Metal Ages, copper, bronze, and iron. Town-based civilizations came in the Bronze Age. The art of writing was developed during the Bronze Age civilizations. The Indus Valley civilization was known for its town planning, crafts, and culture. And if you get an opportunity to visit any of these places, please do so. The Iron Age brought radical changes in the social and economic life of the people in different countries at different times. Then significant contributions were also made in various fields such as polity, philosophy, art, architecture, and sculpture by the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, and Indians. Buddhism and Jainism were the first reformatory movements in 6th century BC in India. Indian civilization in its long course went through a number of significant developments and did not remain one and the same throughout. Changes kept on taking place. And I was talking to you about it, when I was telling you about it, I also told you about the different changes which were the different additions which were coming into our civilization. India has made tremendous contributions in the field of mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, metallurgy, medicines, art, architecture, literature, and learning. Now, that brings us to the end of my readings with you, but I would also like to point out certain important things to you in this book. Like as I told you earlier, at the end of each unit, you have in-text questions and the answers have been given at the back. Now we have terminal exercises also, like how did the Bronze Age mark a shift from the new stage, Stone Age? Now the Stone Ages were the Paleolithic, the Mesolithic, and the Neolithic, and they were the Stone Ages. But during the later part of the Neolithic age, we come across discovery of what is known as copper and bronze, and that is how there's a shift from the new Stone Age to the Bronze Age, because Bronze Age helped in making the life more safer, more easier also. Then what were the important features of the Harappan civilization? Town planning is one of the most important. Then writing, of course, the writing has not been as yet. Religion and various other crafts which have come up during this time, and the art features that have been found for the Mother Goddess and the Pashupati Nath, and the way of preserving not preserving actually, by giving us safe journey to your dead. Now, then you also, there's another question, describe how did the discovery of iron bring in radical changes in the lives of the people? Oh, tremendous. discovery of wheel, which could do many things, cutting down of the jungles, axes made of iron with a wooden handle at the back, and killing of animals. And it had become more settled. People now started living in towns. There was a writing, there were seals, various things were there. So life had really changed. Describe the Roman society and economy during the 5th century BC. Then we also had to describe the social religious during the 5th century BC. Then we also had to describe the social, religious, and economic life of the early Vedic people. Then what is Dhamma, according to Ashoka? And write a short note. I had not discussed this with you at length, but you can read it because I would not have had so much time to do so many things in such a long lesson. Write a short note on India's contribution to world civilizations. India's contribution is tremendous. On the given outline map of the world, you have the civilizations, and answers to in-text questions have also been provided, and which you can also check your answers from the back, and so on and so forth. And then we talked about the universities, about Texala, about Nalanda, about Kashi, about Vikramshila, about Vallabhi. Then we talked about the Sangam age, the Madura, we talked about the Madurai, and then we talked about the Kushan dynasty, which was there, and so many things which I hope we have been able to grasp. And since nobody has asked any questions or raised their hands, I presume that you have really understood a lot from them. So, Namaskar, Jai Hind. Any questions? We still have some seconds left. Any questions? Any persons raising their hands? None? So best of luck. Proceed from class 10 to class 12 and then to the university, which will be very good because it's nice to have young, educated, highly qualified young students.